with ornamental objects like torches, giving you the sense that there may be more than meets the eye. Sometimes it's okay to have a secret that's just totally out of left field, especially if it's holding particularly valuable loot. But I think this sort of thing should be used sparingly, or else you encourage the player to spend 80% of their time in-game butting up against walls and hitting the interact button. Many of Lunacid's secrets are well hidden, and in far more creative ways than in most dungeon crawlers. But all the same, many of its secrets, some of which are not optional to find, are unreasonably well hidden and had me resorting to online walkthrough material more often than I care to admit. A big problem wraps back around to what I mentioned earlier. It's impossible to know what areas are optional and what are mandatory. On some level, this encourages cautious exploration, which is a core aspect of any Kingsfield game I've played. On the other hand, there's a creeping frustration that affected my experience negatively. When you complete a section in a Kingsfield or a Shadow Tower, whether you're activating a quest trigger or finding an item, it's usually clear when you're done. There may be more to find if you stick around and continue to explore, but it's rare that you'll spend an inordinate amount of time thinking to yourself, am I done? Is there more? Am I allowed to leave? Did I miss an exit somewhere? In Lunacid, the sheer volume of secrets and optional branching areas, as well as how they're presented, just the same as the story and poison zones, make it perennially unclear when you're actually progressing. You spend a lot of time feeling like you're in the dark, sometimes literally. There are pros and cons to having an in-game map, and it's certainly not something I think that every game in this style needs. However, I think Lunacid would have benefited from the inclusion of one, even if only a Thief-style map, hand-drawn and kind of inaccurate, just to give you a general idea of the layout, whether or not it's even connected to further areas, would have alleviated much of the guesswork that I found bothersome while playing the game. I frequently came up against dead ends in areas that I was almost positive would result in progression.
God damn it.
It's anyone's guess which of the many levels you have to go back to, looking for forks in the road you might have missed. The exploration that follows your discovery of a new area is exhilarating because it feels like the possibilities have once again opened up. This sort of exploration, though, where you're retracing your steps across huge zones and looking for doorways or halls you might have missed, this just feels like a time sink. This is where Lunacid's indifference towards the player's progression teeters on the edge between impressive and obnoxious. It's all well and good that an optional secret area is insanely well hidden. That's in the great tradition of From's games. But that dynamic changes when you don't know whether or not it is an optional secret area, or where the fuck you're supposed to go when you find out that it isn't. Eventually, all other options seemingly exhausted, I just have to ask the internet, how do I get past this giant door? Well, first of all, the giant door, not the right way apparently. But also, there's a book beside it that says, I have sealed the worst of the Golden Lance's damage in the clock tower. Then you're supposed to shoot a poison or darkness spell at this window. Why though? Is this a clock tower? I don't see a clock anywhere. There's just often not a clear, logical chain of deduction to follow, to the point where some things feel kind of arbitrary, cryptic for the sake of cryptic. It's a bit of a sore spot for me because this is such a great game in so many ways, and much of that greatness is locked away behind puzzles that I found unreasonable.
Unreasonable.
I just found myself regularly
Piece
thinking,
of shit
well,
developer.
how was I supposed to know that? Maybe I'm exposing myself as a baby-brained casual who needs
No.
covered with
These
yellow
piece of
paint
shit
and
developers are
Who
entirely
discount that
goddamn
possibility?
dumb.
And hey, the artistic intent behind the game can indeed be to confuse and bemuse, but good difficulty and good puzzles are crafts all their own, and I was not comprehensively taken by Lunacid's approach to these. Let me be clear, I wouldn't really care if Lunacid didn't kick some degree of ass. I would have just said, what the hell? What were they thinking? Like the great irate gamer himself. In the grand scheme of things, does any of this ruin Lunacid? No, not even close. This is still a very good game. I love Kingsfield. I find it enjoyable to play, I find it intriguing, and I find it to be a satisfying challenge to overcome. I would not, as a rule, describe Kingsfield as fun. Lunacid is fun. Movement is great. The combat is simple but enjoyable, and there's a lot to discover here. There's a steady trickling of new and inventive tools that stays interesting, which is a feat in itself. Just as some of those game systems begin to feel a bit long in the tooth, credits roll, and you're left satisfied. It's just a good feeling game, not only in the act of gameplay, but in the moods it conveys. The game takes Kingsfield's brutalism and dunks it in pomegranate juice spiked with LSD. The result is something truly unique. The name Lunacid kind of evokes it best. It's a moonlit, phantasmagorical world that's enjoyable to explore, providing you can crack into sometimes unreasonable codes. Lunacid's good qualities shine through, a worthy standard bearer for the modern Kings-like, and a game that I would not hesitate to recommend. Lo and behold, about a year and a half later, Kira released a short prequel to Lunacid titled Tears of the Moon. This is noteworthy for two reasons. The first of these is that Tears of the Moon is totally free to play on Steam, which is awesome. The second is that rather than being developed in the Unity engine like the original games, Tears of the Moon was made in the Sword of Moonlight Kingsfield making toolkit, which is also awesome. If you've seen my video on the Kingsfield games, you'll already be familiar with SOM, unless it auto-played while you were asleep. Maybe you picked up on some of it by osmosis, I don't know. This was a piece of software released by From back in the year 2000. Basically, it acts as a comprehensive world editor, allowing users to create their own Kingsfield games using a suite of included or imported resources, and a simple interface that didn't require any programming on the user's part. It's a real oddity. I mean, just the fact that it exists. Kingsfield sold fine, but it wasn't a particularly popular series, even in Japan. So the concept of commercially releasing an editor which allows people to make their own Kingsfield games is just strange. Back in 2000, the PC wasn't a popular choice as a gaming platform in Japan either. As an analog to this, the RPG Maker series, which was very popular in Japan, had console releases as late as 2005, because that's where most of the audience was. Interestingly, RPG Maker was also localized by Agetec, who was in charge of translating the Kingsfield games, but that's neither here nor there. Even to this day, Sword of Moonlight is a fairly obscure corner of the Kingsfield omnibus. In spite of that, there is an active fan base that continues to produce games and update the engine to maintain its compatibility with modern systems. All of that said, building a prequel to Lunacid on this engine is a pretty rad idea, not only because old technology is fun, and it is, but it works on another level too. We're getting to see the before times of Lunacid's world, and as such, experiencing it in a much more abstract and rudimentary format. It's sort of meta in that way. It's also nice that it's free because despite the updates, this engine does show its age. The controller rebinding menu is literally an INI file, and in order to even run properly, the game utilizes a Voodoo 2 graphics card wrapper. The in-game movies look like this for me, and OBS doesn't even recognize the game. I just had to screen record my entire monitor. But hey, it works, and you can even play in high resolution with a modern controller. It's a Kingsfield game, alright. If you're looking to scratch that Kingsfield itch and nothing but the authentic article will do the trick, Tears of the Moon is for you. For all intents and purposes, this is a Kingsfield game as much as it is a Lunacid game. All the guts are here, and so the gameplay is very familiar. The emphasis in combat is once again on circle strafing and waiting for a stamina bar to refill. Your character automatically levels up again, meaning no stats, no alternative character speed, no jump height, no jumping at all. Back in my day, there was no Z-axis, and we liked it. What you see is what you get, and there is a refreshing simplicity in that. It's been a while since I've popped back into a Kingsfield game, so I went into Tears of the Moon primarily expecting a novelty. A game made on this creaky old engine? Well, that's neat. But actually, there is something special about this formula, stripped down to its bare essentials. I can't lay the credit squarely at the feet of the engine, of course. There's a lot of original assets and what I assume are programmatic tricks at work here. Kira did a great job of recreating that classic FromSoft feeling while adding enough artistic identifiers to make clear that this is a Lunacid game. If you're interested in the lore of the main game, there's a bit to chew on here regarding a plot-important character and event. But for the most part, Tears of the Moon is a quiet, gameplay-centric experience. It's short, which is understandable given the circumstances, but what's here is pretty nice. There are about 5 or 6 areas to explore, very reminiscent of the PS1 Kingsfield games. Less open, expansive, and intertwining, more straightforward and maze-like. You'll typically wander into a dungeon, fighting enemies, maybe a boss, then find a key or a magical trinket, allowing you to double back and access previously blocked off areas. There are still secret doors to find, and in typical Lunacid fashion, there's apparently an entire optional area that I just missed completely, but I'll take responsibility for that one. Either way, it's a more straightforward affair here. You're usually after one or two MacGuffins on each map, and then it's off to the next in a relatively linear sequence. There's a decent variety of enemies and even some familiar swag you can acquire. Triple Fang, how I have missed ye. But going from Lunacid back to this really reinforces my appreciation for all the different combat mechanics in the original game. There's only so much you can do with Kingsfield's base combat system, and Tears pretty much does it. Nothing to write home about in that department, but nothing to complain about, because this game is exactly what it purports to be. And even in spite of those engine limitations, the game does still carry that trademark atmosphere with it, one that's wholly different from the original Lunacid. The geometry, lighting, and textures are all much simpler, harkening back to those uncanny 5th-gen console vibes. The original assets created for this game also fit in perfectly. You could have told me that this came out in 1998, and I wouldn't second guess you. There's not much more to it than that. Tears of the Moon is a bare essential Kingsfield experience with a Lunacid coat of paint. It's not surprising that the two are perfectly compatible. It has all the good and bad aspects of an early Kingsfield experience in a bite-sized package, and without costing a dime. For what it is, it's great. More than anything, it's just cool to see this engine being utilized in a quote-unquote legitimate project, and there's a whole world of these sort of Moonlight games out there, so King's heads rejoice. Our time has come. I'm sure nobody would have imagined 25 years ago that we'd still be getting games made with the sort of Moonlight software. I wouldn't recommend this one to just anybody, but if you're a die-hard fan of Kingsfield, it's a no-brainer. Right now, I'd like to take a brief intermission to talk about not a Kings-like game, but a Kingsfield game. If you've watched my Kingsfield video, you'll know that in the mid-2000s, From Software released a number of Kingsfield games for cell phones. These games were developed using the Doja API, which was a Java-based technology available exclusively over the iMode network in Japan, kind of a proto-smartphone service. It's pretty convoluted, which doesn't make the job of explaining what Kingsfield Mobile even is any easier. Unlike its contemporary-ish Kingsfield Additional series on the PSP, the mobile games adhered more closely to the mainline game's design philosophies. Or at least it seems that way, based on descriptions and screenshots. Unfortunately, descriptions and screenshots are all we have to go on. For many years, the KF mobile games have been considered lost media, and it's no wonder. Between the relative obscurity of Kingsfield and the specificity of the platform these games were released on, getting these games playable again seems unlikely. Sourcing a mid-2000s Japanese flip phone with Kingsfield Mobile already installed on it, then somehow backing up that ROM and emulating it, it's a pretty big ask. It's something that many people, myself included, took for granted probably would never happen. It's a good thing, then, that there exist people out there with greater faith and more gumption than I. Kingsfield Mobile has been found, and thanks to the straightforward emulation available via the K-Tai World Launcher, it's even playable. Now, only one of the 3 mobile games have been recovered, but that's a great start, and an incredible victory for both Kingsfield fans and preservationists. It'd be great to hunt down not only the remaining 2 KF mobile games, but any of From's mobile output from this time, including several Lost Armored Core and Tenchu games. If you know somebody with an extensive collection of old Japanese flip phones in their attic, report to your local Kingsfield constabulary post-haste. For now, I wanted to take a brief look at Kingsfield Mobile, and I do mean brief because there's not too much to talk about here. When I first fired up this game, I was under the impression that it was a demake of the original Kingsfield. The layout of the first area is almost identical, down to the skeleton hiding behind the same invisible wall. Except now I'm convinced he's unkillable. I was here for like 20 minutes. These skeletons are making a fool out of me. But it won't be long before any notions of mobile being a recreation of the first game are dispelled. This is an original work. This game takes the bare basic fundamentals of Kingsfield and translates them into a game that could be controlled with this phone.
Oh my god.
You can only equip weapons and armor, no magic to speak of. Rather than each level having a massive, complex map with intersecting routes and tons of secrets to find, the levels here are very simple mazes, like back of the Captain Crunchbox symbol. Obviously, the game looks, like this. But I can't rag on the visuals too much. Yes, it runs at a minuscule resolution, Yes, the levels are comprised of 1 or 2 textures, but man, this was a 2004 flip phone game. Looking at the games most companies were getting away with at this point, yeah, actually this Splinter Cell game looks kind of cool. Hoisted by my own petard with that one. This looks way nicer than fucking Kingsfield. I want to play this. Anyway, it may not be the most visually appealing, but getting Kingsfield's real-time, full 3D world on a flip phone was still a mighty impressive feat. It does an admirable job of recapturing the original game's style, and in fact, I think it reuses some models from that original game. The problem with KF Mobile is that there's just nothing to it. Enemy behaviors, no surprise, are very simple, and the levels are just so flat and uninteresting. They occasionally throw something new at you, like this level where there's invisible floors. The statue at the beginning says, "There's nothing to fear. Step forward with courage." But then every time I step forward with courage, I fucking die. That's the exact sound I made when I realized I had to restart from my last save. But restarting really sucks here because of how slow the game is. Even more than usual, it moves at a languid pace.
Why would you fire? I fired a shotgun 4 times, nothing happened. He was point blank, nothing happened.
From the uninteresting levels to the lack of magic, the whole game makes me appreciate what a great start Kingsfield 1 actually was for the series. So many people write it off because it's such a simplistic experience compared with what would come next, but it did set a strong foundation with plenty of room to build up. It could have been worse. It could have been much worse. Even though Kingsfield Mobile might be the worst official Kingsfield experience, it's amazing to see it found and be made playable. This kind of preservation is important, not specifically because it gives the average Joe convenient access to a mediocre game. It's because through getting to experience a developer's output in its entirety, we can piece together context, giving us a clearer sense of how things evolved and developed. Not only for the developer's games, but the video game industry in general. These forgotten nooks of a company's history are the easiest to disregard and therefore the most important to grab onto while we still can. For the sake of posterity, this playable copy of Kingsfield Mobile is a damn achievement, and we should be happy that we have access to it.
Yep.
Monomyth on paper
Please
is a
don't die
recipe
to
for
the
disaster.
storm.
It's an open-ended dungeon-crawling RPG with immersive sim elements being developed by a single person, kickstarted for less than 40,000 euros. I hate to be the cynic, but my god, how many overly ambitious Kickstarter video game projects need to crash and burn before you look at something like this and think to yourself, this is going
You idiot, you lost the match.
1,000?
Go.
A billion? Well, it's been a long road for Monomyth. This game was successfully kickstarted back in 2021, but it had been in development for many years before that. The lead and only developer, Michael A. Trolls, developed Monomyth in his spare time while working at his quote-unquote real job, before moving to Monomyth full-time, now under the studio banner of Rat Tower Software. Comparing early screenshots of the game to recent promotional materials gives you an idea of how far this game has come in the past decade. Relatively speaking, 40,000 euros might seem like a good chunk of change to some, but when you're developing a video game, that kind of money is burned quickly. That's why Kickstarter projects that net hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars have the propensity
What
to...
the fuck was that, you
like,
fucking
explode.
ass clown?
Rat Tower's decision to keep development
Fucking
to a
ass
solo
clown.
endeavor outside of the occasional contract work may have resulted in slower development for Monomyth, but it's also been more sustainable. Over the years, backers and Steam wishlisters have received a steady trickling of updates and vlogs until at last on October 3rd of 2020.
So I'm going to bed, guys. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to post my videos and go to bed. Going to come back here, and I'm going to stop this YouTube video with a reminder that you've been watching Skycat Live. It's Friday night. It's 12:41 in the morning. It's 9:05:25, and I am going to bed. Come to skycat.live and click on the cast face to donate. Come to the Twitch or the YouTube. Give me a like, sub, or a follow. Thanks so much for all the follows you guys have given me. I really appreciate that. Yeah. And y'all have a good night. Going to bed. Y'all have a good evening, and we'll see you later. Bye. And this video will... I'm sorry.